Today we're going to be covering the core of the Space Wolves wolf pack, the redoubtable veterans known as the Grey Hunters. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we're back for another Space Wolves unit review, going over the Wolves' take on the tactical squad, the Grey Hunter pack. In this video we'll take a look at their datasheet, any obvious rules, combos and synergies on the tabletop, and have a talk about how I think they can be best used in game. Grey Hunters are one of the core squads of the Space Wolves, the rank being attained after the aspirant has become a Bloodclaw and serving their full service, though still being equally hungry for battle as their Bloodclaw brethren. Their aggression is now more tempered with experience that has taught them the value of patience and cunning. Grey Hunters are therefore very tactically flexible, both on the assault and in defence, tracking their prey across the battlefield, or showing true patience of the experienced hunter. As Space Wolves grow more experienced, the Canis Helix, the unique Space Wolves gene seed, causes physical changes. The hair of the Grey Hunters will have turned grey, hence their name. Their eyes are more yellowed, and their teeth have protruded to become more fang-like, making them resemble the wolves of Fenris more so than ever. So let's see how they work on the table. Grey Hunters are of course a troop's choice for Codex Space Wolves. Each Grey Hunter costs 12 points per model, and at base they come in a pack of 5 with a Grey Hunter Pack Leader and 4 Grey Hunters. They are each armed with a bolt gun, bolt pistol and frag and crack grenades, and every single one may as well have a chainsword as well, as they can take one for free. They generally have a profile identical to Tactical Marines, although their squad leader upgrades are a bit more interesting. The Grey Hunter Pack Leader does have an additional attack, but it doesn't have the standard extra +1 leadership that veteran sergeants do. If you want that, you would have to pay 2 points extra for the Wolfguard Pack Leader, who has some other interesting options. Wolfguard Pack Leaders and Wolfguard Terminator Pack Leaders are taken as an additional upgrade to the squad, and they don't replace the standard Battle Brother, meaning that you can have a squad of up to 11 should you want it. The Wolfguard Pack Leader is a little bit more expensive. He'll cost you 14 points to include in the squad, and the Wolfguard Terminator Pack Leader will cost you 29 points once you've paid for his Power Sword and Stormbolter. In terms of war gear options, they have the option to take a Wolf Standard for 10 points, which is very cool, but unfortunately it isn't the most overwhelming upgrade on the table. It only allows you to re-roll dice rolls of 1 when making advance or charge rolls. Grey Hunters certainly are good in close combat with Shock Assault, Hunters Unleashed, and the extra attack from chainswords, but I'm still not convinced that I'd pay an entire extra 10 points for a very small chance of re-rolling some charges, which you might well have just made the charge anyway. I think I'd just rather invest the points in more Battle Brothers. For every 5 models in the unit, the Grey Hunters may replace one with a special weapon, a flamer, plasma gun or melter gun, but not a grav gun. Probably the plasma is the one that most tempts me under normal circumstances, unless you're going with some sort of a special delivery mechanism to get them up close and personal. It's interesting that the Grey Hunters aren't able to take a heavy weapon unlike their standard tactical squad equivalents, and to be frank a little bit unfortunate as that's one of tactical squad's main niches within the Space Marine list. You can also replace one bolt pistol with a plasma pistol somewhere in the squad, which isn't a bad option to have if you are trying to squeeze out every bit of close range firepower. Then we come on to the 3 pack leaders. The Grey Hunter Pack Leader has pretty limited war gear options. He can take a chainsword, power axe, power fist or power sword, but can't upgrade to anything more fancy. It's not too bad for a little bit of a fighty close combat melee unit if you wanted to upgrade him in some way, though they do put out a decent amount of attacks on the charge just with the base squad. I'd be most tempted to upgrade him further if I was paying for some sort of fancy deployment option, such as a drop pod or transport. The Wolfguard Pack Leader that you have as an additional option to buy in, he's armed with a bolt pistol and chainsword at standard, and as normal with my sergeant upgrades I typically advocate swapping out that bolt pistol with a Stormbolter, unless you're particularly feeling like swapping it for another combi weapon or something. He does have access to the full Space Wolves melee weapons list, including things like frost axes and swords, and thunder hammers should you want one. It just basically depends on how much you want to tool up your squad for being strong in close combat. If you did just want to keep the vast number of attacks coming, then I believe that you can even give him 2 chainswords, meaning that this guy could be hitting home with 5 attacks on the charge with Shock Assault. He also has the option to take his Storm Shield, which could help make the squad a little bit more tanky, even if you primarily brought him in with a Storm Shield to tank high AP hits for the squad. Finally, we have the Wolfguard Terminator Pack Leader, who's a very interesting option, as adding a durable 2+ save model with 2 wounds to the unit can really help shrug off some low AP fire. As we said, he comes with a Storm Bolter and Power Sword at base. He can replace that Power Sword with a Storm Shield or an item from the Terminator melee weapons list, and he can replace his Storm Bolter with either a weapon from the Terminator melee weapons list or the combi weapons list, things like combi melters or plasmas or things. I think the exact loadouts that you want on these leaders really will vary depending on how you're going to use them. If you're looking for backfield fire support, then either including a Storm Shield Pack Leader or a Terminator Pack Leader could really help them survive a little bit better against enemy fire. And if you're deploying them up to get into the enemy's face and deal some damage in close combat, then certainly the melee options and combat weapons become far more appealing, and you can actually make really quite a threatening squad out of what is a basic tactical marine unit. In terms of special rules, they have the standard Angels of Death now with combat doctrines including access to Savage Fury, the one that will boost them in close combat when they get to the assault one, Bolter Discipline that will help them get extra rapid fire shots at long range, and Shock Assaults to ensure they hit with a decent bang when they do make melee. The other special rule they have is for their Terminator Pack Leader, which means that he does count as having the Terminator keyword, so he can't embark in transports that wouldn't normally be able to take him, meaning that if you bring him along you could only put him in things like Land Raiders or Storm Ravens. But he does get the Terminator keyword for Bolter Discipline, meaning that he'll be able to move and blaze away with 4 shots at 24-inch range. Overall, the squad is an excessively fighty version of the standard Marine Tactical Squad, with some interesting leadership character options. In terms of buffs and synergy, we've already mentioned that they get decent use out of Savage Fury and Hunters Unleashed, with all of those extra attacks they'll get for chainswords. In terms of character support, all the usual damage dealing buffs will increase their damage output from Wolf Guard Battle Leaders and Wolf Lords, and Wolf Priests as always will be able to help out with extra buffs in melee. A ton of the other various fighty Space Wolves characters will give them various other buffs, mainly bonuses to charges and being in combat when they're there, such as the all-new Ragnar Blackmane, who can give them reroll charges and extra pile-in distance. But in general, the vast majority of these character buffs are usually going to be better when you're focusing on something a little bit fightier than your bog standard troops. They certainly can work, but they just might be better off buffing Wolfguard or something. There's also some relics that can buff their damage output, such as the Morkai Teeth Bolts, helping focus down one enemy unit, or the Wolfenstone to unleash more rage in melee. Of course, they'll also get the usual help that they get from being near Wolfen with rerolling charges too. In terms of transports, one of the best options for them is the drop pod, which can allow them to actually get some use out of that close range firepower and any special weapons that they've brought along with them. A Rhino might be a reasonable choice to get them up the board quicker as well, and the extra durability will really help, as they're just a little bit fragile if they were just a foot slog up. I wouldn't be very tempted to buy anything fancier for them, such as Storm Wolves or Land Raiders. You're best off saving that sort of thing for more elite units if you're using them at all. In terms of stratagems, being a core troops choice and being Space Marine infantry, they understandably have access to a ton of them. They can use True Grits for 1 command points to open up with their bolters when they're within 1 inch of the enemy, as if the bolters were pistol weapons, which can be another nice tool for repelling enemy infantry. The Lone Wolf stratagem is particularly potent on them with their Wolfguard Pack Leaders. If you just had a Terminator Wolfguard Pack Leader left in the squad, then gaining 2 attacks and re-rolling all hit and wounds for the rest of the game is a great way to make that Terminator go on rage mode. From the new Saga of the Beast book, we have things like Transhuman Physiology to give them extra survivability, Steady Advance to allow them to move and keep up Bolter Discipline, and we should always remember Countercharge, the 1 command point one that allows you to 6-inch heroic intervene with any Space Wolves unit. Finally, back from the main Codex again, we also have the option to outflank them, setting them up on the hunt for a command point, where they could be a nice medium threat that you could harass backfield enemy troops with, although typically Space Wolf players do tend to save this for bigger and more scary units that can absolutely destroy things when they get into close combat. I do think for the main part, unless you're absolutely building up a massive squad of these and delivering them in some fancy way, most of the time your command points are generally going to be better spent elsewhere, on bigger units where it's going to count more. But I think it's still well worth remembering that you do have the options for if that Grey Hunter squad becomes particularly vital later in the battle. So how would I run Grey Hunters in-game? I think as we've already talked through, there's a couple of different ways that you could go with the squad. Firstly, along with Bloodclaws, they are the cheapest troops choice in the Codex Space Wolves, so literally keeping them cheap with nothing but bolters and chainswords isn't the worst ever use of your resources. They won't have quite the same amount of damage or impact in the battle as an upgraded squad, or maybe a unit of intercessors might have, but they do let you fill these all-important battalions for cheap, and battalions are likely to be quite easy to achieve, seeing as Space Wolves love their heroes. For small units like this, I think they do better than Bloodclaws, who will typically be wanting to be in a bit of a bigger unit to make their presence felt getting into close combat. The Grey Hunters do have a bit of a penchant for close combat, as do all Space Wolves, but they are a bit happier to stand off and just mow down some people with bolter discipline as well if that's what the situation dictates. As we mentioned before, you could think about including either a Terminator Pat Leader or a Pack Leader with Storm Shield to try and tank some extra shots for them and make the squad unusually durable for what it should be. But obviously this does make it significantly more expensive than the minimum size squad would be, and you'll start to compete directly against Intercessors and Incursors for the points cost, who do have some significant bonuses. The other main way to run them is to try and run them as an actual melee dedicated unit. I'd ideally take a 10-man squad and pack them into either rhinos or drop pods to give yourself a threat that could be thrown virtually anywhere in the battlefield and be pretty decent at cutting through troops, maybe with a bit of a sting in the tail in the form of a Thunderhammer or Power Fist on the Pack Leader. The main problem with this approach is that Wolfguard will tend to do it a bit better. Paying just a couple of extra points for an extra attack means that any transport vehicles or delivery mechanisms will be a bit better value point for point, as it means that you're delivering a more lethal squad to close combat. They're also a lot less restricted with their gear, being able to tool up as much as they want with combi weapons and storm shields, or they can even take jump packs if so desired, as a nice alternative to having a transport vehicle in the first place. They do lose the option of the Terminator Pack Leader, which is an interesting one, but I think on the whole they are a bit of a better unit. Obviously they're elites and not troops. When we're talking about that sort of thing, we'd have to be looking at using something like Intercessors or other Primaris for troops, and being troops is definitely a positive for the Grey Hunters. If I was going for a more ranged variant, I'd typically be aiming to mainly use them to secure objectives in my own deployment zone while the rest of the army goes out hunting, or maybe moving up a little bit, putting those bolters to good work and fighting for some objectives in the midfield. Their shooting isn't the most efficient, but they do somewhat make up for it by having boosted countercharge threat with all of those chainsword attacks. If you're going to try and make them into a more melee unit, again it'll sort of depend on how you're getting them there. If they're in a rhino, then I'd move them up turn 1, maybe pop smoke with the rhino in the midfield, give your opponent a scary threat to deal with, and then the next turn jump out, bolt them, and then hopefully put them to the chainsword. If they're in a drop pod, ideally coming down as early as possible is great, and if they can coordinate with either something that gives them reroll charges like Wolfen, or maybe a chaplain to give them the +2 to charge litany, then that's also great. Ideally they'll be most wanting to carve through light troops with all those strength 4 attacks, and then as per normal either lock up enemy gunline units, maybe wrap and trap units, or just try and find themselves somewhere in cover so they can survive the next turn. In the troop slots, they most are going to be compared to either Bloodclaws or Intercessors, and in all honesty, for the main battle line role, Intercessors do seem to do their job a bit better these days, although they lack a lot of the interesting options. I think the main problem I have with these guys as holding the main battle line is that they're just a little bit easy to kill, which can be mitigated with things like the Terminators and Storm Shield battle leaders, but then that just makes them more expensive. Intercessors have the same amount of attacks as these guys, while also having 2 wounds and arguably better shooting, and I can see why people would in general use Intercessors a bit more in competitive Space Wolves lists. I think it is a bit unfortunate for the Grey Hunters. They can have similar damage output and have very interesting abilities, but I think they'll just need to use a lot more intelligence and skill to actually make them work compared with the more simple Intercessors. All that being said, I really don't think that they're all that far behind with their unique options and ability for lone wolves to be generated and stuff, and you won't really be hampering your list in any massive way by using these over Intercessors or Wolfguard. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Grey Hunters then, including any tactical options that I've missed, or if you think that my evaluation of them isn't fair. It'd be good to hear the thoughts of more experienced Space Wolves generals. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. We will of course be keeping up the regular 40k content, including plenty more for the Space Wolves, with one of the next videos being a video on Wolfen, so check back later if you'd like to see that. If you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon page, as well as helping support me make new videos. There's a few other benefits such as seeing videos early, voting on what comes next in the channel, and the occasional prize draw, where this week we're giving away a box of Start Collecting Vanguard Space Marines to a Patreon. If any of that sounds interesting to you, please check out the link down in the description below. And of course a massive thank you to all of my current Patreons for helping make this channel possible. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.